Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today, I will continue to share with you the difficult, scarce and challenging days of Huyen and her mother trying to make a living. Night falls, the field is immersed in cold mist, and the sound of insects chirping everywhere. Huyen wears a headlamp, quietly bending over the roadside grass to set eel traps. The small light casts down on her gaunt hands as she skillfully inserts bamboo tubes into the waterlogged mud. Next to her is a bucket filled with traps prepared since the afternoon. The gentle night breeze blows her hair into her face, but she remains focused on her work, hoping to catch a few eels to sell at the market tomorrow to earn money for little Micah. Surrounding her is only darkness, but the light on her forehead still flickers like a resilient effort of a poor mother. Early in the morning, when the sun just rose above the lush green rice fields, Huyen and little Micah went to the water ditch to harvest the eel traps set from the night before. The water in the field was still cool, and Huyen rolled up her pants and waded in, skillfully pulling each trap out. Every time she saw eels thrashing inside, she happily called Micah to come and see. The girl stood on the grassy bank, her bright eyes full of excitement as she looked at the bowl filled with shiny, wriggling eels. Huyen bent down and smiled at her, her face covered in mud but her eyes full of joy. After a hard night working in the dark fields, today's harvest made mother and daughter feel lighter, as if they had gained more hope for the difficult days ahead. Under the shade of the tree in the front yard, Huyen sat hunched over on a small plastic chair, carefully cutting each piece of bamboo to make eel traps. The dry bamboo sticks were piled beside her, and the sound of the saw cutting through the wood echoed loudly in the peaceful midday. Her hands moved swiftly, holding the bamboo steady while carefully cutting each segment evenly. The small dog sat opposite, tilting its head and watching Huyen as if curious about her work. Far away, behind the bamboo fence, was a lush green garden where Huyen had planted vegetables herself to improve the meals for her and her mother. Despite the many hardships of life, she diligently prepared each trap with the hope that tonight she would catch more eels, earning extra money to buy rice and food for little Micah. Huyen carried a small plastic box and quietly went to the muddy area behind the house to find worms to use as bait for trapping eels. She squatted down on the damp ground, holding a small pickaxe, continuously turning over the soft soil. Each careful stroke of the pickaxe revealed the red mud beneath the noonday sun. Sweat dotted her face, but Huyen remained focused on searching because she knew that the more bait she had, the easier it would be to catch eels tonight. Her sandals and pants were covered in mud, but the girl still patiently worked in the quiet yard. After digging through the damp soil for a while, Huyen found quite a few worms for bait. She gently brushed off the mud on her hands and carried the plastic bucket back to the yard. Inside the bucket, the small worms wriggled beneath the soft soil, making her smile contentedly. Just then Micah, who had just woken up from her nap with slightly tousled hair, ran barefoot to her mother. Seeing her mother return, the girl happily hugged Huyen and Appo's arm and curiously looked into the bait bucket. Huyen softly laughed, stroked her daughter and Appo's hair and sat down to rest under the shade of a tree. Huyen sat under the shade of a tree, taking small pre-cut bamboo pieces and using a knife to split them into thin slats to make pins for the trap pipe. Her hands moved swiftly but carefully. Each time she split the bamboo, she tried to keep the slats even and sturdy. After splitting, Huyen bent down to smooth and polish the ends of the bamboo with her knife, so they could easily be threaded into the bait pipe. Small bamboo shavings fell all around her feet, and the eel trap gradually took shape through each step. Little Micah sat hugging the small bamboo tubes, her legs swinging on the ground, singing cheerful nonsensical songs. The innocent children in Appo's voice echoed through the quiet afternoon yard, making the atmosphere much more cheerful. Occasionally, she tilted her head to look at her mother, who was focused on polishing the bamboo, then giggled at her own song. Huyen also smiled softly as she listened to her child and Appo's singing, her hands still busy making the eel trap. The sound of the knife slicing bamboo blended with Micah and Appo's childish singing, creating a simple yet warm atmosphere in the small humble house. Huyen carefully held the round bamboo sticks she had just shaved, carefully threading each one through the prepared bamboo bait tubes. Her hands moved swiftly but skillfully, as each eel trap gradually took shape under the soft sunlight. Then she placed the trap and Appo's opening onto the end of the tube, gently adjusting it to fit tightly so that the eels could enter but not escape. Nearby, little Micah held several small trap openings in her hands, admiring them while softly singing unclear children and Appo's songs. Occasionally, the girl would hand her mother another bamboo stick, causing Huyen to smile gently. Huyen broke a small stick in half and gave Micah one half to help her mother. The girl imitated her mother, carefully using the tiny stick to pick up each worm and place them into the bamboo bait tube. Seeing her focused, Huyen smiled gently and continued quickly preparing the other traps. After filling the bait, she gently sealed the open end of the woven trap with the pre-made lid, adjusting each one to be secure. The eel traps lined up in a row beside the mother and daughter, Micah and Appo's cheerful chatter blended with the sound of bamboo hitting each other, making the small yard feel warm and cozy. Despite the simple and hard work, Huyen still felt lighthearted with her little daughter sitting beside her to help. The trap tubes, after some preparation, are gradually completed. Huyen carefully checks each trap, gently adjusts the bamboo mouth with her hands to make it secure, then neatly places them into the plastic box beside her. Little Micah sits nearby, watching the pile of traps grow little by little, her big eyes full of delight. When everything is finished, Huyen stands up, dusts off the bamboo dust from her clothes, then holds the box with both hands and carefully places it in the corner of the house to be used for setting traps later. The evening light dims outside, and a gentle breeze rustles through the bamboo rows, producing a familiar sound. Micah happily follows her mother, while the small dog runs around as if understanding that the hard day and Appo's work for mother and daughter is about to end. Huyen sat down by the firewood stove in front of the house porch. The dry branches, just ignited, made the familiar crackling sound, and a thin stream of smoke rose in the peaceful afternoon. She placed the water pot on the stove and sat down at the old bamboo table. From her cloth bag, Huyen took out a packet of flour and carefully poured it into a large bowl. The fine white powder covered the bottom of the bowl under the flickering flames. Little Micah sat beside her, resting her chin on her hand, watching her mother intently with curious eyes as she prepared the evening meal. Huyen and little Micah stepped out to a small water well placed in front of the house yard. She scooped clear water into a bowl of flour she was holding in her hand. As soon as she saw her mother preparing to stir the batter, Micah quickly grabbed the small chopsticks, giggling and demanding to do it herself. Huyen gently smiled and handed the bowl to her. The girl sat leaning, attentively stirring the flour in the bowl with her tiny hands, making the white flour swirl around clumsily but with delight. Occasionally, Micah looked up at her mother as if waiting for praise, while Huyen gently held the bowl to prevent it from spilling. Seeing little Micah clumsily stirring the batter and spilling it over the edge of the bowl, Huyen burst into laughter and gently took the bowl from her child and Appo's hands. She quickly stirred the mixture evenly until it became smooth, the bamboo chopsticks spinning swiftly in her hands, and in just a moment the batter was thickened. Meanwhile, Micah sat beside her, resting her chin on her hand, watching her mother with delight. After stirring the batter, Huyen took some ripe bananas, placed them on the table, and then sliced them into pieces to eat. The fragrant yellow banana slices were neatly arranged on a small plate, ready to be fried with the flour. Huyen took the old pan and went to the small bamboo bridge in front of the ditch to wash it clean. The bamboo bridge gently trembled under her footsteps, and below, the still water flowed quietly among the green grass along the bank. Huyen sat on the edge of the bridge, using a dishcloth to scrub and rinse the pan multiple times to remove the old dust and oil. The evening light reflected on the water, making her face appear more gentle and peaceful. Little Micah sat inside the house watching her mother, holding a bowl of batter she just stirred, and calling out eagerly for her mother to come back quickly. After washing the pan, Huyen stood up, lightly brushed her sleeves, and took the pan back into the house. Huyen placed the pan on the wood stove, with the flickering flame underneath gradually heating the bottom. She poured in a little oil, then tested it lightly with chopsticks, listening for the sizzle before scooping in spoonfuls of banana-flavored flour batter into the pan. The pieces of cake, upon touching the oil, gradually turned golden at the edges, and the sweet aroma of ripe bananas combined with the scent of fried batter filled the small house. Huyen carefully turned each piece to cook evenly on both sides, the flickering flames casting a focused glow on her face. Outside the yard, Micah happily led the dog around the front of the house. The children and Appo's laughter echoed brightly in the afternoon, making the space feel more lively. The small dog, running ahead and then turning back to wag its tail, made Micah giggle with delight before she ran after it. Occasionally, she would bend down to hug the dog and pet its head like a close friend. Inside the house, Huyen was still sitting by the stove, turning fragrant golden cakes, listening to the children playing outside and smiling softly, feeling at peace. The last fried banana cakes turned golden and fragrant. Huyen gently picked up the cakes and placed them on a small bamboo tray, set in front of the yard for ventilation. As soon as she saw the hot cakes being set down, little Micah hurried over and sat right at the table, her bright eyes gazing at the delicious-smelling cakes. When she saw her child reaching out to grab a cake to eat immediately, Huyen chuckled softly and gently reminded, "You need to wash your hands first." Micah pouted slightly but still obediently looked at her mother. Huyen bent down, picked up her child, held her in her arms, and took her inside to wash her hands thoroughly. Outside in the yard, the plate of cakes was still steaming in the fading sunlight, while the small dog sat beside the bamboo table, looking up, waiting to be given a piece of the tasty cake. Huyen placed baby Micah sitting beside the small water barrel and gently scooped water to wash her hands. She carefully scrubbed each tiny finger that still had flour and dirt from the yard. The cool water flowing over the small hands made Micah giggle, occasionally splashing water around. Huyen, while drying her child and Appo's hands, softly reminded her to always wash her hands thoroughly before eating. The late afternoon sunlight cast a gentle glow on the young mother and Appo's face, full of kindness and care. After washing her hands, she took an old towel to dry Micah and Appo's hands and then carried her back to the yard, where a plate of hot banana cake still smelled delicious on the small bamboo table. The mother and daughter sit down beside a small bamboo table in front of the house. The plate of golden fried banana cakes is still hot, emitting a sweet aroma that fills the peaceful countryside afternoon air. Huyen picks up a cake, carefully blows on it to cool it down, then breaks it into small pieces to feed baby Micah. The little girl opens her mouth wide, eating and giggling happily because of the crispy, fragrant cake. Seeing her daughter eat happily, Huyen also smiles gently, her eyes shining with love and relief after a hard day. The small dog lies next to the table, looking up at the mother and daughter with eager anticipation. The evening breeze gently blows through the bamboo rows and Micah and Appo's laughter echoes across the small yard, making the humble house feel warm and peaceful. It was late at night, and only the sounds of insects chirping outside the garden and the gentle night wind passing through the bamboo walls could be heard. In the simple small house, a flickering oil lamp cast a faint yellow light, projecting the shadows of a mother and child onto the earthen wall. Huyen held baby Micah in her arms, walking around the house. She gently stroked her child and Appo's soft hair and softly sang a lullaby in a warm, gentle voice. Baby Micah nuzzled into her mother and Appo's chest, her eyes gradually closing as she drifted into a peaceful sleep. Huyen still gently rocked her in her arms, her eyes full of love mixed with a hint of exhaustion after a long day of work. Huyen gently placed baby Micah on the small bed in the corner of the house. She bent down to pull the thin blanket over her child and sat quietly, watching the face of the sleeping baby under the flickering oil lamp. Micah and Appo's breath was steady, and her small lips slightly parted as if still dreaming a beautiful dream. Seeing that her child was deeply asleep, Huyen gently stroked the soft, tousled hair of the baby and smiled tenderly. Outside, the night wind began to blow colder. Huyen stood up and approached the window, pulling the old fabric curtain to block the draft. The dim oil lamplight made the small room even more peaceful and warm. Huyen gently got up from the edge of the bed, afraid of waking baby Micah. She grabbed an old flashlight and placed it on her head, its flickering light illuminating the dark bamboo wall. Then, Huyen moved to the corner of the house, holding a plastic box filled with eel traps she had prepared in the afternoon. The bamboo tubes softly clinked against each other, making a faint clicking sound in the quiet night. She looked back at baby Micah for the last time, seeing her still sleeping soundly under a thin blanket. Then she felt reassured. Huyen carefully closed the door, using a wooden stick to wedge it shut so the night wind wouldn't blow it open. Outside, the night had covered the field completely, leaving only the faint moonlight and the sounds of insects echoing everywhere. Wearing the headlamp, Huyen silently carried the trap box and walked along the dark dirt road, beginning her nocturnal work to provide for her and her child and Appo's livelihood. When I reached the field, it was already completely dark, with only the flashlight on Huyen and Appo's head flickering amidst the vast night. The night wind blew through the rice fields, making a cold rustling sound. Huyen rolled up her pants, slowly wading into the muddy water channel. She carefully bent down, placing each eel trap along the edge of the grass by the bank, gently adjusting the trap openings and covering them with a bit of mud to make it easier for the eels to enter. Mud and dirt clung to her legs and pants, but Huyen patiently moved from one section of the channel to another. The small light on her forehead flickered intermittently in the darkness, illuminating her face, which looked tired but determined. In the distance, only the croaking of frogs and the gentle rippling of water under her feet could be heard. Alone in the cold night field, Huyen quietly worked, hoping that by morning, the traps would be full of eels so that she and her mother could have a hearty meal. After setting the last traps, Huyen took a deep breath and carried the empty plastic bucket back home. The dirt road through the dark fields was only filled with the sound of muddy footsteps and flickering flashlight beams above her head. When she reached the yard, Huyen went straight to the small bamboo bridge in front of the ditch. She sat on the edge of the bridge, scooped water with a bowl to wash her hands and feet, which were covered in mud after a night of working in the fields. The cool water flowing over her made her feel somewhat more comfortable. After washing, Huyen stood up, wiped her hands and feet briefly, and quietly entered the house. She gently closed the door, carefully inserting a wooden wedge as if afraid that the night wind would wake little Micah. Inside the small house, the oil lamp still flickered on the corner of the table. Huyen turned off the light, lay down beside her sleeping daughter, and gently pulled the blanket over her. Outside, the sound of insects persisted through the late night, while inside the humble house, mother and daughter finally fell asleep after a long, exhausting day. The early morning mist covers a thin layer of fog over the small house at the end of the field. After waking up, Huyen gently opens the wooden door, and the soft sunlight immediately filters inside the house. The cool morning air carries the scent of fresh grass and the moist earth after a long night, making her smile softly. Little Micah rubs her eyes and then runs happily after her mother to the yard. Mother and daughter hold hands as they walk around the small garden in front of the house. Dewdrops still cling to the vegetable leaves, sparkling in the early sunlight. Birds chirp and hop from branch to branch, and the small dog runs around happily at their feet. Huyen takes a deep breath, her hair gently fluttering in the morning breeze, while Micah happily bends down to look at the wildflowers along the road. The peaceful morning scene makes the small house feel warmer, opening the way for a gentle and loving new day. Huyen took Micah and Appo's hand and led her back into the house. The morning sunlight streamed through the window frame, making the small house feel warm and bright. Huyen took a coconut scoop to draw water from the tank and bent down to wash her daughter and Appo's face. Micah obediently stood still, her eyes still sleepy but already smiling happily. Then mother and daughter sat in front of the porch to brush their teeth. Micah held a tiny toothbrush, mimicking her mother by brushing back and forth, occasionally giggling because of the foam sticking around her mouth. Huyen looked at her child affectionately and gently wiped her face with a clean old towel. Nearby, the small dog lay obediently on the cool ground, its tail gently wagging as it watched the mother and daughter. Huyen quickly put on her worn-out, faded shirt over her shoulders, then reached for the conical hat hanging on the wall. She carefully adjusted the hat on little Micah and Appo's head, tightening the strap so it wouldn't and Appo's fall off during the walk. Little Micah obediently stood still, her bright eyes looking at her mother, then gently holding her hand. Before leaving, Huyen turned back to close the old wooden door, using a bamboo stick to wedge it securely. She took the faded plastic basin placed on the corner of the porch and then led Micah out of the house. Huyen and Micah hold hands as they walk along a small dirt path leading to the field. The early morning is still covered in a thin layer of mist, making the surrounding scenery peaceful and cool. Huyen holds an old plastic basin in one hand, while the other tightly grips Micah and Appo's small hand. She walks slowly so her daughter can keep up on the rugged path full of weeds. Little Micah walks while curiously looking around, occasionally bending down to pick up a dry leaf or pointing towards the flock of birds flying over the rice field. The gentle morning breeze softly sways Huyen and Appo's worn shoulder cloth, and the conical hat on the two of them tilts with each step. The familiar path leads the mother and daughter across the dewy grass, heading toward the spots where traps were set overnight. In the quiet early morning space, only the sound of sandals hitting the ground and Micah and Appo's soft laughter echoing through the peaceful countryside. Reaching the ditch where the trap is set, Huyen stopped and gently crouched down to instruct little Micah to stand still on the grassy bank, not to go near the water and Appo's edge because the ground is still slippery in the early morning. Little Micah obediently nodded, holding her small hat and watching her mother attentively. Huyen placed the bucket on the ground, then bent down to roll up her pants above the knees. The icy water in the ditch made her shiver slightly as she stepped down. Her familiar bare feet slowly waded through the soft mud, with gentle ripples spreading around her under the morning sunlight. Huyen bent down to lift the first trap out of the water. The water droplets dripped into the muddy ditch as she carefully opened the trap and poured the catch into a bucket on the bank. A small eel wriggled inside, making little Micah cheer happily. Looking at the first catch, Huyen gently smiled with relief. Although it was just a small eel, for her it represented the effort from the previous evening and hope for the two of them's meal. She quickly wiped the water off her face and continued wading along the ditch to check the remaining traps. Mud clung to her feet, but Huyen still patiently took slow steps through the cold water. On the bank, little Micah held the bucket, standing and waiting for her mother, her eyes always eagerly watching each time Huyen pulled another trap out of the water. Each subsequent trap was gradually pulled up from the water by Huyen. She gently opened the trap and poured its contents into a bucket placed on the shore. Some traps caught a small eel the size of a finger, while others were empty, with only a few algae caught inside. Nevertheless, every time she saw an eel fall into the bucket, Huyen still smiled with hope. The bucket gradually filled with a few small eels wriggling in the murky water. Little Micah sat crouched on the shore, watching intently, occasionally excitedly pointing at the eels crawling back and forth. Under the icy canal, Huyen still patiently wades from one trap to another. When she reached a trap close to the tall grass, she lifted it and immediately felt it was much heavier. Huyen quickly opened the trap and dumped it forcefully into the bucket on the shore. Instantly, several large, golden eels fell into the water, wriggling continuously, making little Micah cheer excitedly. The splashing of water echoed as the healthy eels wriggled in the narrow bucket. Seeing that the result was much better than before, Huyen and Apos' face lit up with a bright smile, her eyes shining with unmistakable joy. She quickly continued checking the remaining traps. Each time she opened a trap, a few large eels appeared, filling the bucket more and more. Little Micah happily hugged the bucket, standing on the shore, constantly calling out to her mother to see each big eel thrashing inside. After wading through the ditch for a while, Huyen finally collected all the remaining traps. She stood in the water, took a deep breath, and looked at the bucket filled with quite a few eels, smiling with satisfaction. Today and Apos' harvest, although not very large, was enough to make her happy because her efforts had been rewarded. Huyen stepped onto the shore, bent down to gather the wet traps, holding them tightly in her arms. With her other hand, she carefully carried the bucket of eels, which were wriggling and splashing inside. Little Micah trotted beside her mother, her small face still full of excitement after the morning spent helping her mother check the traps. The mother and daughter slowly left the dew-covered countryside. The narrow dirt path stretched out before them, the gentle morning breeze softly blowing across the lush green rice fields, leaving tiny footprints on the moist ground of the peaceful dawn. Huyen held Micah and Apos' hand as they followed the small path down to the town. The eel basket was carefully held in her arms in front of her chest, while the traps were neatly tied and carried with her. After a rather exhausting morning wading through the canal, she hoped to sell some eels to buy rice and food for her and her child. Passing by a house with a slightly open door, Huyen hesitated and then gently pushed the door open and stepped into the yard. She bowed politely and softly asked, and quote, "Uncle, do you want to buy eels?" End quote. The person inside looked at the basket and shook their heads slightly in refusal. Hearing that, Huyen simply nodded silently and said nothing more. She gently squeezed Micah and Apos' hand and quietly turned to leave. Micah looked up at her mother with small eyes, but Huyen still tried to keep a gentle smile for her child. The mother and daughter continued walking along the street in the town, their small figures gradually disappearing into the busy morning crowd. Huyen saw a small shop just opening in the morning. She gently bent down to adjust Micah and Apos' hat and then led her child closer. Holding a waterlogged eel bucket, she politely asked, and quote, "Excuse me, do you want to buy eels?" End quote. The woman standing inside the shop glanced at the bucket and frowned in annoyance. She waved her hand dismissively, saying, and quote, "I Don and Apos' buy, go somewhere else to sell. Don and Apos' hang around here." End quote. Then she picked up a broom and swept as if to chase the mother and daughter away. Huyen, hearing these words, slightly bowed her head, her hand tightening around Micah and Apos'. She did not reply, only quietly held the bucket and turned to walk away. Little Micah silently walked beside her mother, her small eyes confusedly looking toward the shop they had just left. Walking a little further, Huyen saw a woman standing in front of the house gate, sweeping the yard. She gently stopped, gathered her courage, and led little Micah closer. The bucket in her hand still contained some fresh eels wriggling gently inside. Huyen politely bowed her head, speaking softly but with hope, and quote, "Excuse me, do you buy eels? The eels I just caught are very fresh and delicious." End quote. After speaking, she slightly lifted the bucket so the woman could see more clearly. Beside her, little Micah stood close to her mother, her big eyes looking at the woman in front of her as if also hoping for a good answer. The woman looked down at the bucket full of fresh eels and then glanced at the mother and child standing under the increasingly intense midday sun. Seeing Huyen and Apos' tired face and little Micah snuggling beside her, she gently softened her heart. She opened the gate and softly called, and quote, "Come on, the two of you go inside the yard and sit to rest in the shade. I and Apos' buy the eels later." End quote. Huyen was slightly surprised, then quickly bowed her head in continuous thanks. She led Micah into the shady yard in front of the house. The cool breeze under the eaves made the mother and child feel much lighter after the long journey selling eels. Huyen placed the bucket on the tiled ground, and little Micah obediently sat close to her mother. The woman brought out 2 glasses of cold water and placed them in front of them, her eyes full of sympathy as she looked at the hard-working mother and child in the scorching midday heat. In that moment her simple kindness brought a rare smile of gratitude to Huyen and Apo's face. After weighing the eel, the woman gently handed the money to Huyen. She carefully took it and quickly counted, her eyes shining with happiness and relief because finally, the effort of both mother and daughter all morning had paid off. Huyen bowed her head repeatedly in thanks and hesitated before asking, and quote, "Aunt, do you want to buy more eels? Next time I will bring more." End quote. The woman smiled kindly while gathering the eel tray and replied, and quote, "Yes, if you have more next time, just bring it here for me." End quote. Hearing this, Huyen and Apo's face lit up even more. Little Micah stood beside her, happily holding her mother and Apo's hand. Amidst the busy town and Apo's sunshine, the woman and Apo's kindness made the hearts of the mother and daughter much warmer. After a tiring morning working in the fields and then wandering down to the town to sell eels, Huyen led little Micah back to the small house at the end of the field. The road home was now flooded with midday sunlight, and the mother and child and Apo's steps were somewhat weary, but their hearts felt lighter because they had sold the eels they just caught. As they reached the yard, Huyen quickly took off her soaked conical hat and hung it on the wall. She gently brushed her messy hair, taking a short moment to rest before starting the next task. Little Micah ran into the house to sit beside the small dog lying under the shade. Not long after, Huyen quickly knelt down to light the stove. She gathered some dry wood and ignited it, and a thin stream of smoke quickly rose from the simple roof. The flickering flames reflected on the young woman and Apo's face still dotted with sweat from a hard morning of livelihood. Huyen stooped to pick up the old aluminum pot and placed it beside the corner of the stove, then walked over to the familiar rice barrel. She opened the lid, revealing only a thin layer of rice remaining at the bottom. Huyen and Apo's eyes slightly lowered for a moment. She reached into the barrel, slowly scooping out small handfuls of rice and pouring them into the measuring jar. The white grains, mixed with a few bits of broken husk, crunched softly under her hand. Huyen had to tilt the entire barrel, patiently scooping until she had just enough for a small bowl of porridge for the 2 of them. By the crackling fire, little Micah sat hugging her small dog, watching her mother. Huyen took a gentle breath, then poured the rice into the pot and carefully carried out the water jar. Although the rice in the house was nearly gone, she still tried to maintain a calm appearance, only hoping that today and Apo's lunch would be enough to fill her young daughter and Apo's stomach. After washing the rice, Huyen placed the pot on the burning stove. Since there wasn't in Apo's much rice left, she cooked a pot of thin porridge to make it easier for the mother and daughter to eat and also more filling. The flickering flame below crackled softly, and a thin stream of smoke rose up, mingling with the familiar smell of dry wood in the small kitchen. Then she took a basket outside and picked out 3 small eels she had deliberately saved for today and Apo's meal. Huyen carefully washed each one, while Micah helped her mother scoop water and pour it out for cleaning, her nimble hands removing the remaining mud from the outside. The shiny golden eels wriggled gently in her hands, making little Micah delightedly watch. Although they were just a few small eels for Huyen, they still represented a precious meal after a hard morning. She softly smiled as she looked at the bubbling porridge on the stove, feeling a quiet relief that today, mother and daughter had a hot meal in their simple little house. At this moment, the porridge pot on the stove had started to boil vigorously, with steam rising thickly throughout the small kitchen. Huyen gently dropped a few cleaned eels into the pot, then used an old pair of chopsticks to stir them around so they cooked evenly. The aroma of the porridge combined with the hot eel scent gradually spread, making little Micah sitting near the stove also eager to look into the pot. After waiting for the eels to become tender, Huyen carefully used chopsticks to pick each one out and place them into a small bowl. She sat on the porch, skillfully removing the soft yellow meat and gently taking out all the bones so Micah wouldn't choke while eating. The few pieces of eel meat she gathered carefully, while the bones were set aside separately. The porridge pot on the stove is now fully cooked, with the rice grains bursting and blending into a thick, soft white porridge. Huyen carefully lifts the pot and sets it aside, then quickly takes an old pan and places it on the stove. She adds a little pork fat remaining in the jar, some minced shallots, and a few slices of mashed turmeric into the pan. After a moment, the rich, fragrant aroma of fried shallots combined with the warm yellow turmeric spreads throughout the small kitchen. Huyen pours the freshly peeled eel meat into the pan, stirring with chopsticks to brown the meat and absorb the flavors. The sizzling sound fills the air happily beside the glowing red fire. The golden eel pieces gradually release their aroma, making little Micah swallow her saliva and sit patiently next to her mother. When the eel is fragrant and cooked, Huyen again places the pot of porridge on the stove and gently pours all the eel meat into it. She stirs continuously, letting the porridge boil a little longer so the sweetness of the eel melds into each steaming spoonful. The pot of eel porridge finally cooked to a fragrant steaming perfection. Huyen gently lifted the pot off the stove and quickly wiped her hands on her worn apron. She set a small table in the middle of the house, neatly placing 2 bowls and a pair of old chopsticks on the surface. Then, Huyen carefully carried the steaming hot porridge and placed it in the center of the table. The aroma of the eel porridge wafted up, making the small house feel warmer and more inviting. She scooped the porridge into 2 bowls, giving Micah a portion with more eel meat, and let it cool slightly. Little Micah sat upright on a small chair, her eager eyes fixed on the bowl of porridge in front of her. Huyen used a spoon to scoop each serving, gently blowing on it to cool it down before feeding her child. Micah obediently opened her mouth, eating happily and smiling, which made Huyen also smile softly. After finishing the porridge, Huyen gathered the dishes and scooped the remaining porridge into a bowl to take outside for the small dog. As soon as Huyen stepped out, the dog ran around wagging its tail happily. She placed the bowl on the ground, and the dog immediately bowed its head to eat happily in the shade in front of the house. After eating, the dog rolled onto its back in the yard, its 4 legs curled up in delight. Huyen chuckled and sat down beside it, gently scratching its belly. It lay still with its eyes closed, enjoying the sensation, its tail occasionally tapping softly on the ground, feeling very comfortable. Behind her, little Micah hugged her mother and Appo's shoulder and leaned against her back, her small legs swinging back and forth. Huyen, while scratching the dog, gently tilted her head to look at her daughter, her eyes full of tenderness and peace. The afternoon at the small house passed slowly amidst the whispering whine through the bamboo, Micah and Appo's giggles, and the simple yet warm scene of the 3 little members together. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Appo's mother and child, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a supportive comment for the 2 of them to see the next developments. Every follow and loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and encouragement for Huyen to try to get through difficult times. Thank you all very much.